It's a great honor to be back in the Arctic, where I've been coming for 41 years. I keep track. At first, I knew absolutely nothing. It's always a bit of a shock to discover that. But that was the way we were educated in the South, to be ignorant about the reality of most of the country. And I've made many discoveries over the years here with people like Iqaluit and Susan and other people in the audience. There are days now when I feel like I understand a tiny bit, but just a tiny bit. So tonight I might be taking a bit of a risk with how much I know, so forgive me for that. What I do know is that we need to bring our mythology in line with our reality, and I think that's pretty well what we've been hearing tonight from the speakers. And also that reconciliation is nothing if it doesn't include restitution. You can't have a history of so much taking away and then talk about reconciliation. There has to be restitution. That's real money, real power, real changes in how the country is structured. And we've only done tiny, tiny bits of that. And I think a very interesting new example, which I heard about only since I arrived here, is this Performing Arts Center project, which sounds like exactly the kind of thing that needs to happen in Iqaluit. What everybody's saying really adds up to: you can't do this without culture, but you can't do culture without structures. It goes back to what the CBC is saying. It goes back to what we're all saying. This doesn't happen without culture. It's not a business plan. It's a cultural reality. So I want to talk just about education, just. Education has always lain at the heart of civilization, all civilizations. It might be traditional education coming from elders, on the land or not, or it might be formal school and university-based education, or it might be some kind of mix of the two. You may have heard about the wonderful land-based education offered by Dechinta University outside Yellowknife, a really fascinating model. Also, a very intense experience, and so available to very few, but it could spread. But the thing I really can't get out of my mind, and that we must not forget, is that Canada remains the only circumpolar country without fully fledged universities in the Arctic. All the other countries, with less money, with smaller populations, less territory except for Russia, have northern universities. Greenland has northern university. Iceland, with a population of 200,000-300,000, has a very good northern university. Norway, Sweden, Finland, Alaska, all of them have healthy, functioning northern universities. And none of them were started with the arcane rules of the Canadian Universities Association, rules which are designed to force the imitation of their southern model. All of the other northern universities started as experiments. They were often very small. They modeled themselves on the truth of the North, and they combined that in some ways with the influence of the European tradition. Now, when I'm talking about northern universities, I'm not talking about colleges. Colleges have a valuable but very different function. It's a difference between, in a sense, the idea of creative and training, to put it very, very simply. But they're incredibly valuable, both of them, but different functions. And it would be an enormous mistake in the Arctic for business plan reasons, to confuse these two functions. I can't think of a place where it's more important to separate out these two functions. The central truth is really very simple. Arctic higher education belongs in the Arctic. Arctic research belongs in the Arctic. Arctic healthcare training, legal training, architecture, engineering, all belong in the Arctic. Why is Canada's Centre of Polar Bear expertise in a southern university? Why? Why is university-based Northern expertise based in Victoria, Calgary, Quebec City, all across the South? There are Northern expert centers who come up here for a month in the summer or whatever. Very rarely in any relationship with the communities. Why? Well, the answer isn't very complicated. These centers, these departments bring in tens of millions of dollars to Southern universities every year. And this structure continues the domination of Southerners in Northern fields of study. If I meet one more Southern professor, expert in the North, who says to me at the end of the conversation, I just hope I'll be the last generation. But you know he's just taken on 2 or 3 tenure track students to replace him. This marginalizes Northern culture and the full role of the Iqaluit language in the development of Northern expertise. This continues the Southern European linear approach to the North, again, marginalizing ideas and approaches developed here. Without universities in the North, the whole wealth creation and community creation function of universities is missing here. The capacity to inspire Northern students in their own territories is missing here. There are a lot of people who will say, well, you've got to start from the bottom up, first put in place K-12, and only then work on a university. It hasn't been done that way anywhere else in the world, and I can tell you that was not the way Canada was built. The public education system in Canada was not built that way in the 19th century. They did the public education system at the same time that they did the university system, and the literacy level in Canada in the middle of the 19th century was appalling. And that didn't stop. They had no money, no education, and they built universities at the same time. So this is a nonsense argument. In education, you have to both push and pull at the same time. You have to build the K-12 with a strong Iqaluit component, but also build the leadership and the intellectual component at the same time, also with a strong Iqaluit component. A study was done in 2016 by KPMG recommending against an Arctic university, putting the government in an impossible position. I believe it was a classic consultant report serving the old interests. When I look at what they proposed, I cannot think of a system more likely to reinforce the wealth and the influence of the Southern universities, a system in which they get to shape and, in effect, own programming developed through colleges. In the absence of a university, young Inuit do not have local role models, a local context in which to identify themselves as leaders, a place to build self-confidence. This is not about size or European models, as the Southern universities like to insist, nor is this about money. There's lots of money for Northern post-secondary education. It just happens to be going to Southern universities. Those universities need to look at themselves in the mirror, to look for their ethical obligation to give back to the North what it is due. A Northern university would be a remarkable opportunity to reinvent the idea of learning in an Arctic context, which I believe could provide great leadership. You could say postmodern leadership by combining Northern ideas with those of the South. And if you'll forgive me for saying, one of the advantages of 41 years of going in and out of here is every time I meet yet another wave of young Inuit coming up, ready to run universities like that, if they are given the chance. This is a remarkable opportunity, which I think is a central part of the restitution which Canada owes to the North. Now, Quebec.